Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, for House Education, January 27th, 2025, Representative Bratton,
Here.
Representative Erickson, Representative Gudenmoss,
Here.
Representative Kelly,
Here.
Representative Lawley,
Here.
Representative Singh,
Excused.
Representative Strock,
Here.
Representative Williams,
Here.
Chairman Andrew.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. And welcome to the Education and Miscellaneous Topic Committee. We're actually starting to run out of education-specific bills, so we've agreed to take on some of the workload of our other committees. So thank you. The first bill House Bill 31 is now on the table for our consideration. Representative Pendergraft, would you like to explain the bill for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You might have phrased that incorrectly, because if I answer that honestly. Actually, I would. This is a fairly simple bill in my mind. This is actually a rerun. This was run a few years ago. And this is in response to a situation where several schools were looking at an active shooter situation and developing a plan among themselves, and they came up with various ideas to be able to block the doors so that children could be protected within those doors in the event of an active shooter. And so they came up with some ideas. They took a piece of fire hose, for example, and put it over the closing arms of a door to impede its being open from the outside. And at some point, the fire marshal came in and said, that's not going to work for us. And so this is meant to address that. One of the first parts, lines 1 through 4 on page 1, one of the things that I think is important to have in this bill is a requirement for school districts to adopt some security policies. There's the old adage that failure to plan is planning to fail. And I didn't find any school districts that hadn't already developed something, but in the unlikely event that it hasn't been covered, then it would be a good thing to rehearse that, to figure that out, to come up with a plan. And that plan may or may not involve, depending on the structure or the way your school is laid out, may or may not involve any of the things here. In doing this, I do have online a witness that will be available that probably could answer some questions that I can't. And Officer Hill of the Sheridan County Sheriff's Department is the one that developed a plan for that area. And he has found some devices that will block the door. And they're only deployed while they're in a drill, just to teach the kids and the faculty, the staff, how to use them. So he'll have more on that and the details, and if anybody would like to see, I do have pictures of those devices. They're fairly simple. One is just a block that goes over the arms. And then another one slides under the door. It's kind of like a piece of angle iron that opens up like that, so that while you're in there, nobody can breach the door from the outside. To me, this bill is primarily about common sense and local control. You know, I think it's 1958 was the last time when we actually had a serious problem with children in a school and a fire. We build these buildings out of steel and stone, and with their sprinkler systems within and alarm systems within. We've done a terrific job at doing that. A more urgent threat, as I see it, would be the potential of an active shooter. And so this is meant to amend that. If we look down just a little bit, School District Board of Trustees shall adopt safety and security policies. That's the part that I was talking about. Let's see. Section C, a school district safety and security policies and drafts of the policies will be confidential. We don't these things would be done in the executive session. We don't want to telegraph to a would-be shooter how we're going to respond. He doesn't really need that information. So it's not meant to keep the public in the dark, but it is meant to preserve the integrity of the plan. The meat of the thing is actually on page 3. And if there's anything controversial in this, it would be page 3, line 6, state fire marshal shall not prohibit the use of a door securement device used under a school safety and security policy adopted under Wyoming statute. The state fire marshal may adopt rules regulating the use of door securement devices, including requiring the door devices only be deployed during threats or safety drills. Enactment puts it at July 1. The committee may choose or suggest to put this into effect immediately, as I know that some of the school districts would like to do that. And in conclusion, I'd like to mention that I did speak with the WASCOP chairman, Alan Thompson, and his organization was very much in favor. That's the sheriff's departments and the chiefs of police were very much in favor of this bill, giving us the opportunity to work with common sense to protect our children. With that, I would be glad to attempt to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Do we have any comments from state agencies on this bill?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the House Committee. My name is Wanda Maloney. I'm with the Department of Education, speaking on behalf of Superintendent Dagenfelder. She is in support of House Bill 31 and has made school safety a priority. She also has worked this fall to create a conference and worked closely with the Wyoming Homeland Security Office and then also with our state construction department to create that guidebook, which further supports. She believes this bill would also further codify that requirement to have safety plans in place. Just one further note, we do already collect safety plans through our accreditation processes in Chapter 6 rules. So although it's not currently in statute, we do collect that information. Happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, thank you for coming in. One question I have is the safety plans that you collect, are those also confidential?
Chairman Andrew and Representative, they are confidential. We do an assurance to check to make sure that they have something in place, but the details are not available to the public.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I've received a lot of pushback about the idea that this bill tells another agency to basically stand down, that we have in our system that has a purpose and a role to play. Do you have any input on the superintendent's position on that approach?
I would ask our Chief of Staff to come and join me to further explain that.
Chief Shaner.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, Representative Lawley, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, the language on page 3, lines 6 through 12, we're kind of telling an agency to just stand down, don't do the job that the state has given you to do, and we'll make a decision without your input, and it's how I read that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you, Representative Lawley, to that fire code issue, it's been something we've been hearing about from districts for many years, and the Education Committee's heard it too. And it's, I think it'll end up being something this committee will have to decide, but we've heard it enough to where we believe it's an issue with school districts that needs to be resolved, and they need to be able to use some of these devices that have been prohibited. So it's been a long-standing debate that we've been dealing with.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any other comment from state agencies? All right, we will go to public comment. I think we can allow 10 minutes for testimony in opposition to the bill and 10 minutes for testimony in support. We'll start with opposition. Anybody speaking in opposition to the bill? Good afternoon.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Eric Quinney, President of the Wyoming Fire Chiefs Association. The premise of the bill is great. I think every school district should provide a security and safety plan. The problem with it is that this is basically asking us to ignore the fire code. The fire code has been written, and most times in blood, because of incidents that have happened over the years. Representative Pendergraft did state that we haven't had, a major problem with school fires for a long time, and there's a reason why. Because we've changed the way we've built buildings, we've instituted sprinklers, we've followed the fire code. And by allowing school districts to use whatever they would like to secure their doors is putting not only the children at risk, but my firefighters at risk when they go in to handle an emergency. There's a reason why certain devices are prohibited. Okay, and we do not want in the future to wish that we wouldn't have passed this bill as it stands now, because a security device was used that wasn't fire code compliant, and maybe a child or a teacher or a first responder couldn't get out of a certain situation. We are in support of security devices, and there's plenty of them on the market that are fire code compliant. Why would we ignore the fire code and allow the use of anything in this situation? So I would just ask the committee that we need to think long and hard to disregard the fire marshal's office and their job in favor of school security, because it's going to come at the cost potentially of someone's life, and that's not what we want. And so there's the fire code for a reason, and if we start doing end runs around the fire code, then what next section are we going to ignore in the future? That the school districts don't want to comply with the security devices that are fire code compliant. Well, maybe the cost of installing sprinklers is too expensive in the future, and we don't want to do that in the future. I think this leads us down a really dangerous road. So in the Fire Chiefs Association is in opposition of not the bill as a whole, but the opposition that the State Fire Marshal Office shall not prohibit the use of any door securement device. I think we need to involve the fire marshal in these situations. And I understand the school districts might be frustrated in having to follow the fire code. There's a lot of contractors that are frustrated that have to follow the fire, electrical, and plumbing codes, but they're there for a reason. And I think we need to stand by the codes as written, and there's plenty of devices that they could use in that process. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your mind, what would it look like to try to create a pathway of cooperation? So where there's, school districts looking at options for them, what might fit them, and interacting with the fire marshals and dealing with that. What would the path forward look like?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I think there could be great cooperation in school districts working with the State Fire Marshal's Office and local fire departments to come up with solutions that meet the fire code, and working together. And as new schools are built and are constructed, guaranteed that an engineer is not going to sign off on anything that isn't fire code compliant. So we need to work together. And I think like you mentioned earlier, to ask an agency to stand down from doing their job so that school districts can have an easier time figuring out how they're going to secure their doors in a security plan, I think is just a dangerous road. I think we do need to work together and involve the State Fire Marshal's Office and the local fire departments to come up with a plan that works and is safe for not only the kids, but our firefighters that are going in to respond to an emergency situation.
Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there devices to use on these doors that are compliant? And can you just expand a little bit about that, the compliant versus non-compliant in terms of fire code rules?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, yes, there are devices on the market now that are fire code compliant, that allow for the doors and the egress so basically to be able to get out of the room safely, and instead of, like I think Representative Pendergraft mentioned, the fire hose idea that many school districts are trying to use, that you drape over the arms of the door, and the door cannot be exited safely in those situations. So most school security plans are designed to lock the kids in their classrooms, right, and keep the intruders out, which is great. But if the threat then some way makes its way into the classroom, let's say something thrown through a window that may be an incendiary device, and we need those kids to quickly now get out of that classroom, these non-compliant security devices are making that difficult, if not impossible. And so that the compliant security devices, or devices that are fire code compliant, allow for the proper egress out of that room as designed. It locks from people getting in, but people can get out without having to have special knowledge, without having to have a key, without having to move. In this situation, could allow, bunch of desks or whatever security device to be moved in front of that door, and now nobody can get out. Well, nobody can get in, but now nobody can get out. That's what we're worried about, is the ability for people to safely exit the room if there is a problem within that room, whether that be a kid or a teacher or a firefighter that is in that room. And we do not want just any device to be able to be used, because that's what's going to happen, is people are going to need to get out and they're not going to be able to.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else testifying in opposition to this bill? If there is anyone else still waiting, please come take a chair. All right, good afternoon. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, hi. My name is Anthony Pomerel. I'm the building official for the city of Cheyenne. I've previously served as the building official for Laramie County. I honestly didn't have an intention of opposing or supporting this bill. I would echo all of the comments that were made by the gentleman that was just sitting up here before you. They are clear and concise comments about the code and about the concerns that we have as regulators for people to be able to egress a space. I'm only up here for one reason, and a comment was made about current construction methods and schools and the requirement for fire suppression in those. That is very accurate as well, as far as a statement made. But I think it's very important for this group to understand that we deal with many schools that have been existing for a very long time. And I can tell you, in this jurisdiction, both the city and Laramie County, we have a number of schools. As they are older, they don't have fire suppression in them. And I think it's very important that the committee is able to consider that information as well when they're making a decision. I have nothing else, sir.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm Lanny Applegate. I represent the Wyoming Fire Chiefs. I should have come up earlier with Eric, but the one thing I just want to expand on is right now, the state of Wyoming has a board, a council appointed by the governor that's been in place for 40 years plus probably, and who serves on that currently is Dan Johnson, who's a fire chief over in Laramie, Justin Smith, he's out of Casper and he represents the cities and the counties. Rob Forrester is on the electrical board. That's a 5-member board, and one of those members of that board has to be somebody from the electrical board. So Rob Forrester, he's out of the Sheridan area. Spencer Pollock, he represents the general public. And then Katie Wilson, she represents the architects and general contractors. So there already is a council for them to work on, and it's been in place for a good number of years statutorily. So I just wanted to share that with you. So, and I have no doubt that I know the fire service, I'll have 50 years involvement with the fire service this year. And I know darn good and well that the fire service would work very closely with the schools, and this council would be willing to work with them. So with that, that's all I have. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? None.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll move on to anyone speaking in favor of the bill, and I think we will go online first. There was someone that the sponsor mentioned he'd like to hear from.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Officer Boot Hill is in the room, so Mr. Hill, if you want to just unmute and turn on your camera, we are ready for you.
Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hopefully I got that figured out. Sorry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Boot Hill. I am currently employed with the Sheridan County Sheriff's Office in Sheridan, Wyoming. I've been with them for 21 years. I have a grand total of 26 years in law enforcement. The last 9 years, 9 years of that is as an SRO, school resource officer. I feel very much in favor of these locking devices, what we call third-party locking devices. We have three basic ways we can keep our kids, staff, and visitors safe here at the schools during a critical incident. That is training of the kiddos and the teachers. We do that just like we do fire drills or shelter-in-place drills. Our second way is law enforcement presence within the schools. I currently oversee 4 schools on 3 different campuses. As we all know, law enforcement numbers are down right now across the state. To have somebody at every school just isn't feasible. So we have to look at other ways to keep our staff and students safe. One of those, and a major one, is these third-party locking devices. We in Sheridan County School District 1 have not just been using, as it was referred to earlier, as whatever. We are using manufactured locking devices that are designed to be easily implemented and removed by staff or students. We train with those. The safest way or the safest thing in a school during a critical incident is to be where the bad guy isn't. We want our staff and students to evacuate the school. That's just not always a possibility given the situation. So if we have to have staff and students shelter in place, we lock the door and we double lock it so that threat can't get in. The locking devices that we've been using and we're told we're in violation of fire and electrical code are pre-manufactured. They are very quick to install and very quick to uninstall in case the situation evolves to where we can evacuate that area. There are schools or places that have used some homemade, if you will, devices. I personally believe that the manufactured ones, the tool that is designed to do the job is the best tool for the job. That's why we've been using what we have been. These critical incidents usually last very short time, 5 to 7 minutes. If we can use a tool that is easy to get on and keeps that room double safe, that might be enough time for our local law enforcement to show up and save lives. But as I said, we take them off just as quickly. Within a matter of seconds, we can have that off and evacuate. I have been researching this for quite some time. I have not seen a list of approved devices from the state fire marshals. We've had this discussion within our school district and the school district with the fire marshal's office. I would love to see that list so we can work with them. We're not asking for any agency to stand down or look away. We're asking for cooperation with them to keep our kids and staff safe during a critical incident. As was stated earlier, We haven't had a fire that claimed the life of a staff or student since the 1950s. But as we all know, incidents across the nation with active gunmen or other critical incidences are almost monthly. So we need to look at what's going on, what's the current trend, and how do we keep our staff and students safe from what's going on now. I personally would love to work with the State Fire Marshal's office, come up with a list and have that statewide to keep our staff safe. But we're not asking anybody to look away or stand down. I feel very strongly as an SRO and as a parent of kids in these schools that this is very critical, and we're not doing our due diligence if we don't address this and give them the best opportunity to survive a critical incident. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Bratton.
Thank you. If you're still there, Officer Hill, I just wanted to thank you for giving me a tour of the school and showing me the devices that you use in your school. And I would agree that those were very easy. The several devices that you showed me were very easy to both install and remove. So I appreciate your spending your time so I would have firsthand knowledge of that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any further questions? Representative Erickson.
Mr. Hill, I also appreciate you testifying today, but I've had the opportunity to use some of these fire hoses in my teaching career, and not saying that they were the greatest thing or not, but I kind of need to lay my eyes on, or have you give a little better description of what exactly they look like. Some of our members have toured that and have a look, but can you explain a little more as to what exactly they look like? I'm having a hard time deciphering the difference between the remedies that we've used in the past.
Yeah, I'll absolutely do my best. And I do know Mr. Pendergrass has some pictures of the devices that we've used here at Sheridan County 1. We have three basic devices. One is what we call a cowbell, and it's designed just like a cowbell. It's open end on both ends, and it slides on. It's got a little handle. It slides over those A arms, the assist closing arms. Now, none of these devices ensure that the access cannot be gained. What they're designed to do is help, just like a door lock. You know, we lock the door, but if it's worth locking, especially in this kind of situation, it's worth doing over and over, okay? So we use this in conjunction to keep them safe while they break a window and they use a secondary exit plan, or the threat passes by and they can safely exit the building or get out. But that cowbell designed to go over that opening arm where you would have put the fire hose. There again, as I said, the best tool for a job is a tool designed for that job. So it can, as the fire marshals were concerned, be easily implemented and removed. So we can say, okay, it's time to go, pull that and go. The second device we have, we call a door shovel. It has two shovels that go under the doors, and then they expand left and right and lock into the metal frame. If the actual door lock deadbolt is defeated, that door is then secured by a secondary device under that door. There again, giving staff, students, or whomever time to find that exit, that secondary exit. Or if they're coming in, we teach our kiddos, you know, we don't go look for the fight, but if the fight comes to us, we fight. So we spread out, and it gives them time to come up with a secondary plan. This is all about time. You know, the seconds count, minutes count in these critical incidences. And that's what we're trying to give the kiddos is time so we can get there or the threat passes by. The third device we have is a bar, and it's got kind of a Y-shaped hook that will go over. Now these we have different ones because we have, you know, different doors. We have to have separate ones, but each one is designed for the door that it's used on. So it is easily put in place and removed. And as I said, Mr. Pendergraft has the photos of those.
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions? Vice Chair Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of information about cost of these devices that you spoke of, and then even go further perhaps to a comparison to some of the other devices that are out there that might meet the fire requirements.
Thank you. You have a little bit less than a minute if you would be able to respond on that. Thank you.
I cannot speak as to the cost of what we use. They are called a Barracuda is the brand name. And as I spoke earlier, I have not seen a list of approved items by the state fire marshals, so I can't do any comparison there, but I would love to.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Public testimony is now closed. Committee, what is your pleasure on the bill? Moved by Representative Strzok, seconded by Representative Bratton. Are there any amendments? Vice Chair Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This might end up being more of a conceptual amendment, but I would move deleting on page 3, lines 6 through 12, and doing something that, first of all, requires the fire marshal to create a list of approved devices, and maybe in consultation with the school districts. I can wait for a second, see if I get that, I guess.
All set. Well,
Anybody? We have to get a second first.
second that.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Williams. Seconded. All right. Representative Pendergraft, would you like to work the bill with us?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, if I might, while he's getting up here,
Please.
my concern is instructing basically the fire marshals to stand down in this situation. Obviously, there's some relational issues here and ability to function together, which I do think needs to be addressed, but I feel very uncomfortable if something were to happen that we had told the fire marshals to just stand down on this and something happens. And so anyway, I'm very uncomfortable with that part of the bill.
Discussion on that? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't consider this an unfriendly amendment. This is actually part of what I was trying to get to, and I think Officer Hill kind of expressed a little bit of frustration that we've been trying to get something like this working for some time, and no one has ever presented him with an approved device. And certainly it'd be terrific if we could do that. I sometimes wonder what they might cost, and I think that was a great question as well. These devices, like I said, I'll forward you each pictures of them. The one that goes over the arm is basically just like a metal box with a handle on it, and you just slide it up over the arm. It comes right back off. Pretty simple. And then the other device slides underneath the door, opens up and locks in place, and holds the door against the jamb. My appreciation for those devices, and something for the committee to consider, is that until these other devices, however they work out, are procured and put in place, I would like to see some sort of a stopgap so that these schools could continue to do what they're doing with an eye toward achieving exactly what we're setting up here. So I thank Representative Lawley for bringing up this issue, and quite frankly, as I see it, bringing the fire marshal to the table.
Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Representative Pendergraft, before you get away, is it true, I guess I'm thinking about the cost to the local districts if they already have these devices. I know the schools that I looked at, they already had some of these, they had these manufactured devices, and I don't want to, that seem simple, they seem like they work, they would be easily removed, so that, I would like to see the schools work with the fire marshal, and I don't want to necessarily put any additional costs on our local school districts if they have things that currently are workable.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. We have a solution that is working now. It may not be perfect, but we need something. I think the urgency, I think Officer Hill mentioned that there's some sort of an incident across the country virtually monthly. I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that, but it certainly is much more urgent and pressing. And what this bill seeks to do, in my mind, is bring this to the attention of everybody and let's come up with a solution rather than allowing it to sit there and there be this tension. So whatever you, as the committee, are able to come up with, I will definitely support.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion by the committee on Representative Lawley's amendment? Sure. Please go ahead.
So I thought what I was hearing is that you would be open to the concept of asking for a list to be created, but you would like to have some temporary sort of approval to use what's already purchased and then begin to work together in the process of making sure we have the best, even if we have to pay a little bit more money. The safety of our children is important to me, and I do see that there's sort of a little bit of a standoff here, and I don't really know how else to solve it, and I don't have the expertise, and so, but I do want to make sure our children are safe. So what would you say about that?
Mr. Chairman. Representative Lawley, yes. Again, my bringing this bill was to raise a red flag, say, we've got an issue here. We've got SROs that are trying to do their job. They're doing it the best way that they know, and they're being roadblocked without necessarily being given alternatives. So yes, we need to look at the alternatives. We need to employ something that satisfies everybody and everybody that's involved with this. But we also have that interim immediate need to be able to protect our children.
Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to have a time frame on that. So we have the immediate need, but then also, obviously, there has been a knowledge that we've had a situation for a while, and so I would like to have something in that would require them to come up with that list. What do you think would be a reasonable amount of time to come up with said list?
Representative Pendergraft.
Mr. Chairman, until I see a list of possible authorized deployable devices, it would be hard to say. I don't know whether that's going to involve rewiring buildings to put some sort of an override on the outside, or I don't know. I agree with you that it would be good to have some sort of a sunset to be able to have this resolved, but I don't know how readily available they are. I don't know how expensive they are. It'd be really hard for me to make a decision.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lawley.
Perhaps we could ask the people from the State Fire Marshal's Office to give us an idea of what they think it would take to get this list together, and then work with that. And yeah, I think that's probably better.
All right. Would you like to come forward? Do you have an idea? Yes. Please state your name again. Sorry, I
Eric
should have
Quinney,
wrote it down,
President
but thank you.
of the Wyoming Fire Chiefs Association. And I don't want to speak on behalf of the State Fire Marshal, but I certainly think that is something that could be easily attainable, to provide a list to the school districts of already commercially approved devices. I think the important, anything can be manufactured. And so just because it's manufactured doesn't mean it's safe, right? And so, but there are approved devices. So I think the ability to put out that list should come rather quickly from the State Fire Marshal's office. I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I feel like that's something that could happen in a relatively quick fashion to be able to get out to the school districts so that they can use approved devices.
All right, thank you. We were asking for if you have an idea of a time frame. Are you not able to give us an idea of that?
Well, as far as like in a time frame and to produce a list, I mean, like I said, I do not want to speak on behalf of the State Fire Marshal's office, but I think that could happen rather quickly because there are approved devices on the market. So putting out that list to the school district should be able to happen rather quickly.
6 months?
Oh, within 6 months, I would imagine
All right, thank
less
you.
than that. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Representative Guggenmoss, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are these devices, these approved devices, are they portable, like, say, what we're talking about that you don't like, those cowbell types? Are they transportable like that, or is it more of a built-in?
So the approved devices that there's a range of those. There's some that are built in, that are involved in like new construction type situations, and there are portable devices that are easily put on and removed, that take in all the fire code elements, right? When we're talking about some of these devices that go over the A-arms, right, that help keep the door closed, one of the reasons they don't meet the fire code per se is because let's take a third grader, right? Let's say the teacher becomes incapacitated, has put on that device on the door that's high. Can the third grader then take that device off? Those types of things are taken into consideration in terms of, just because something is easily deployed and easily taken off doesn't necessarily mean that is, meets the fire code in terms of, can everybody that's inside that room do it? Can everybody put it on? Can everybody take it off? Some of those types of things. But the approved devices that are on the market now have a range from being portable and to something more expensive and elaborate systems that are built in.
All right, thank you. All right, any further discussion on the amendment? Do we need another explanation of what this conceptual amendment does? I might.
Mr. Chairman, you keep looking at me, so let me give it a try here. The conceptual amendment would be that, first of all, that the state fire marshal would create a list. And I think we heard the time frame of 6 months. Sounds like it could be even 3 months to create that list, maybe 6 months. All right, 6 months. And then that, I think we need something in here that says that districts can do some things in this, that might be temporary later, determined to be temporary, but they can do something now. It sounds like many have already, so we kind of cover that. I think that's a very good point. So we'd kind of do both of those things and try to maybe create a little bit better communication and cooperation as we try to work through these things, because this is in my view, very important bill in many ways, because of what we've done with the gun-free zones. If that becomes law, which I support, but that constitutional right does not in any way discharge our duty and responsibility as a legislature to protect our schools and make sure they're safe in every possible way. So I think the bill is important. I think building cooperation is even more important moving forward. And so I think that's what I want to express in that amendment, is that we're trying to get to that place somehow. Probably not typical legislative things to help rebuild relationships with people, but I don't know how else to approach this, honestly, at this point, but that would be the conceptual amendment.
Thank you. Does the second agree to that? All right, is there any further discussion on this? Representative Williams?
I do agree that the time of the time limit for the list to be produced, I would prefer, was it 6 months? Yeah, I would prefer 6 days, but I I accept that. That's my second stance.
Representative Bratton.
I would like, if I may, to amend that amendment to 3 months, Mr. Chairman.
Instead of friendly,
For limit, I don't have any problem with that.
a second. All right, further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against, say no. The amendment passes. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Question on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 31, passed amendment, Representative Bratton,
Aye.
Representative Erickson,
Aye.
Representative Gutherland,
Aye.
Representative Kelly,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Singh,
Aye.
Representative Ross,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Chairman.
Aye. All right, the bill has passed the committee. House Bill 202 is now on the table for our consideration. Representative Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Education Committee. I bring you House Bill 202, and I think all of us are going to get an education today. But anyway, I bring you House Bill 202. It's a Fast Tracks Permits Act. Right now, if you look at, I'll kind of give you a little background. There's many municipalities, towns, counties that sometimes going through the building permit process and to be able to get shovels in the ground, sometimes it's very burdensome. It seems like a lot of the power is laid upon the municipality and hardly any of the power is within the applicant. So it seems like it's, from what I heard from running for office and knocking on the doors, a lot of people want to kind of help bring that power to be more equal, if that makes sense, to where applicants do have an equal say within their process of doing their building permits. And it also keeps everybody in check. It keeps the municipalities in check in their building departments, and it also keeps the applicant in check, where we got to do all of our due diligences and make sure we have a proper building permit in order to proceed. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go through the bill a little bit. And I also have Mr. Doherty with me. I'm myself being an applicant many times. I've never been on the administrative side of it. So it's always good to kind of have maybe a couple of those different looks at this bill and how that process works. But with that, I'll go through the bill, Mr. Chairman. Okay, the first part of it is the act. I want to kind of reference pretty much on line 4. This is permitted zoning uses. Most of this bill is what is pertaining to this is permitted zoning uses. So it's something that's allowed within a zoning. It's a permittable project that's allowed within that already existing zoning. Mr. Chairman, so that was the first part. If we go to page, I want to go to page 2. If we look at, we're creating that 1613-101 for permitting timelines for developments and improved property. Little I, delivery by electronic means. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of our building permits and stuff like that are actually done more electronically than it used to be walking down and handwriting everything and stuff like that. The local government entity, of course, I would consider a town, county, city, any of those municipalities that actually has a building permit process. And then it goes to 3 little i's, and it's request. Request means an applicant within a subject property's permitted zoning use for an approval from a local government entity for an action related to the development or improvement of property, including building permit, change of permitting zoning use, or variance. The request shall not include, and I think this is very key, shall not include applicants for conditional use permits, rezoning, subdivision permits, subdivision plats, or temporary zoning uses. And I think the reason why we have that part in there is the fact I do believe in public comment. If you're going to change a zoning on a piece of land, or, doing a subdivision permit or a plat, I think, there needs to be that time for public comment, for people to come in. If they want to change a zoning from light industrial to heavy industrial, I think neighbors should know if you want to put a nuclear power plant in their backyard, I think we need those things and the transparencies. So on page 3, Part B, this kind of gives after the applicant submits a request to the local government entity, which would be, the request would be, you've done all your due diligence as the applicant. So you've gotten your engineer drawings, your watershed studies, whatever is required to do your project within that permitted zone. What it does inside the meat of that is the government entity shall provide written notice no later than 15 days after the receipt of the request, notifying the applicant if the applicant's request is complete or incomplete. So if there might be something that is missing or something within your application, it lets the municipality in writing come to you and say, hey, you missed that watershed study. Do you have it, right? So they got to let you know those things within 15 days because many of these projects, they're moving pretty fast and they want to get shovels in the ground. So kind of lets that municipality to look at that project and say, oh, missing something. They can get a hold of us. We can get that fixed and get resubmitted back over. Part C on page 3 is if the development of improvement that is subject to the applicant's request within a subject property's permitting zoning use, the local entity shall now require meetings related to zoning between the applicant and the local government entity. The local government entity shall continue the process. So what's that saying is if you got a permitted use within that zoning, we don't have to go through that 45-day or whatever those processes are for public comment because you're already permitted within inside that zoning use. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to go as fast as we can on this. On Part 4, this is a very important, in order the name of the bill, fast track permit, after an applicant submits a complete request to the local government entity, the local government entity shall approve or deny applicant's request no later than 60 days after the date the completed request is submitted. Unless, and there's some exceptions here, but honestly, I believe 60 days is a little much. If you have everything good, all your engineer drawings are stamped, everything is good, and you can pretty much put shovels in the ground. I'd like to knock that back to 30 days because our building season in Wyoming is very short. As we know right now, I've got a project going right now. I can't even hardly use an auger to dig a hole in the ground. It's so froze. So we need to move these on a little bit quicker. But also on little I, or first 1 little I, 2 little I, I think the meat of this, it keeps everybody equitable, keeps the municipality equitable, and it keeps the applicant equitable. So it creates the due diligence on both sides in order to create a good building project and permit, so that way when it's out, it's ready to go. Let's see here, trying to go as quick as I can here. Page 5. Let's see, any requirements missed by local, this is, you're gonna hear probably some testimony that's very not in favor of this part, but any requirements missed by a local government entity during a plan review of applicant's request is imposed on the applicant after the applicant's request has been approved shall result in a 10% reduction in the applicant's fees charged. And the reason why I bring this part of this bill in here is many times if, say a building inspector, you've already started your project and a building inspector comes out and says, oh, hey, you know what, we forgot you're gonna need this instead, for whether it's health and safety reasons or whatever it might be. But it costs the applicant more money to get it re-engineered and drawn, and also time and labor, and it delays the project. So what this does is it tells the municipality, once you stamp that permit, once you give them that permit, you're held accountable too. So we had to do our due diligence, the municipality has to do their due diligence, which in turn creates that equitability, I think. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I believe that's pretty much a summary of the bill. I would like if any questions, if Mr. Doherty would like to speak on this too, on the other side of this. That way we kind of get both sides on why this bill came about, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is,
How pervasive is this problem that we're going to a state remedy?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, I believe it depends on the municipality. I believe it depends on their building departments. I mean, there's some municipalities that don't even have a building department or planning reviews or anything like that. But I think it's in certain areas of our state, what I think it does is this will create a guideline for everybody to go by. And then that way we expect, as a developer, we know what to expect to see what's going on down the road. I believe that there is some parts of the state that would have a very hard time committing to a 30 or 60-day plan review and building permit process, especially even though it's a permitted zoned use. I think they're going to have a hard time with these. But that's one of the reasons why these types of bills come out, to make that equitability all the way across the board throughout our state. But there is some, Representative Kelly. Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Well, Jeff can actually answer some of this too, guys.
Let's go
Or
ahead.
Mr. Doherty.
Chair Andrews, Representative Kelly, Jeff Doherty. I think in answer to your question, I think it happens a lot more than jurisdictions think that it happens. And that's one of the reasons the representative is bringing this bill, because there isn't a way. Usually this is handled in the field. Elected officials rarely hear about it. And so one of the reasons that this bill is helpful is because of that 10% refund. What that does is the folks who approve refunds are the elected officials. And so if a plan set is in the field and an inspector goes out and does an inspection and comes up with pages of corrections after the fact, that's going to end up in front of the elected officials. And I think if it happens rarely, the elected officials will say, great, everybody gets a bad day. But I think if it happens multiple times a day, it's going to cause the elected officials to get together with their staff and try to refine those processes so that the product out the door the first time stamped is a better product.
All right, Vice Chair Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, both of you. Good to see you, Representative. Good to see you, Mr. Doherty. I was wondering about, we're talking about how often this occurs, and one of the nuances I would like to know a little more about is, do you see it more in industrial or in residential? Is there a distinction in how this breaks down at the local level? I'm kind of hesitant to be a little bit so prescriptive, but anyway, with these things from the state to the local, because sometimes we could be doing unfunded mandates to our local government to, put on more people to get these things done quickly. And, but that's some of my concern. But is there a difference, one of them more of a concern than other, residential versus commercial here in Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I think it's both. I think it's right across the board. Everything from your industrial to your commercial. Now, when we talk about those in residential, that's 3 different building permits, right? When we're talking about those zoned uses. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot more in the planning process to build a massive industrial, a refinery or something that's heavy industrial. That's probably going to go through the process of the public comment and stuff like that, because there's probably going to be zone changes, if that is correct. But, this mainly is targeted more towards the average Joe citizen who's trying to just pull some permits to build a single car garage next to his house or build a storage facility out on his land out in the county. So I think it's more aimed towards that, and maybe a residential type home builder to be able to at least foresee how quick they can get their projects up and running. Because right now with our housing market the way it is, especially in the county I live in, we have a shortage of housing, which is driving costs through the roof. So the faster we can get more of the product onto the market is going to help try to level out those costs and maybe see a lot more younger folks be able to afford some homes. And I've talked to some developers in my community, they would love this, just for that reason.
Vice Chair Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You kind of hit on some of my concerns, that the residential may be more suited for some of these deadlines, but when you do some of the industrial that have different layers of comment, different layers of evaluation, it kind of all gets pushed together in this bill. There's no distinction between the two. So anyway, I was wondering if you were open to starting with residential perhaps.
Who's good?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I like everything being the way it is. because mostly your heavy industrial, and I can let Mr. Doherty go into this a little bit more too. Most of your heavy industrial and stuff will not fall under this, if you look at page 2, down there, it says, requests shall not include applicants for conditional use permits, rezoning, subdivision permits, subdivision plats, or temporary zoning uses. So when we're talking about a larger project, this shall not be referenced for that. But I would let Mr. Doherty explain some more, if that'd be okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Representative Lawley, thank you for the question. I think the vast majority of these permits, in answer to your previous question, are going to be residential. There are just a lot more residential permits than commercial. But I would say that, building a welding shop in an industrial park is pretty straightforward. I would say that building an ag building on a ranching operation is pretty straightforward. I think where it gets problematic for the jurisdictions is when they're going through, when it requires a conditional use. If it's a conditional use, those are uses that might be allowed in the zone, provided that anticipated impacts can be offset. I think in that instance, that's excluded from the scope of this bill, and I think we would be okay to proceed as written, but it's the prerogative of this committee.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start by saying I understand the upside of these types of regulations, that we have massive projects at potential massive economic loss when they get delayed, that we have a shortage of housing, which is driving up prices, which is driving up property taxes, which we hear about. But I have a couple of concerns and questions about having a permanent solution to possibly a temporary problem. Why would you say local authorities and local redress is inadequate for these problems right now?
Please go ahead.
Chairman Andrew, Representative Kelly, I believe it's fear, to be honest. I think the local municipalities, I think anytime we decide to change something that's in statute, that mandates something that's out of their norms and out of their comfort zone, it creates a little bit of a fear. And then you got also the 10% permitting fees, it's going to have them be held accountable. And as of right now, as an applicant, you are at the whim of whatever they want you to do, and you have no choice. There's no repercussions for it. There's no whys. It's if they want it, you have to do it. So I think this gives it that level playing field. Hopefully that helps you answer your question, or Representative Kelly.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd also like to follow up because whenever we're setting a precedent for the state stepping in and taking away some authority or giving more direction to localities, I'd like to know of a compelling state interest, that it goes beyond maybe better economics, short-term prices in housing, or even convenience. So could you please state a compelling state interest that while there is a huge upside to what you're presenting here, why, just in the term of local control versus state dominance, why this is needed?
Representative Filer.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, if I could, I'd like to refer to Mr. Doherty. He's got a pretty good answer.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, I think first and foremost, the concern is the protection of private property rights. If you look around at other states like Utah, they've acted in a similar fashion to try to encourage local jurisdictions to act in a way that's respectful of private property rights. And having an end zone that moves or a timeline that's unreasonable for a permit, applicants have a due process right as well that's at hand. So the brief answer to your question is that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any for Representative Williams?
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Filer, just clarify for me, if you would, please, in page 2, line 20, 21 there, you reference different building permits, and after this discussion that we've had, does that current language of property including a building permit, is that sufficient to accomplish the intent of this bill?
Chairman Andrew, Representative Williams, I believe the language, I believe it does, but I do understand the pushback on this part. But if we look at like the change of permitted zoning use, I mean, that's, if it's already a permitted zone or a zone's already allowable permitting and you can change that, say you want to have an in-home daycare in your home or something like that. I think it does take care of that. And a lot of these permitted zoning uses or variances, many municipalities, if they're not changing the zone, actual zone, can be done administratively in a lot faster process. So, but I believe the pushback will be to, folks will probably want to take that part out, but I don't believe it. I mean, I guess I could go either way on that, but if Mr. Doherty has anything else to add to that or not.
Any further Representative Erickson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think an important part of this is to make sure that we emphasize what you've talked about here, and that is that you've done your due diligence. Everything's lined up. Sometimes we get these bad stories that come from counties, including my own as well as my neighbor to the north, so Lincoln and Teton, as to where they haven't enforced something before, and then they get into kind of a questionable use of that property, and then it all turns into, the builder's trying to get away with this or that or the other. So key thing, I think, is focusing on that, and it says it right in your bill. You've done the due diligence that you need to do. It's not a violation that has been abused prior to that, and that's very much needed in the western part of the state. So you hear about these all the time. There's no reason why they're taking so long.
Any comments on that? All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any comments from state agencies on this bill? We will move on to public comment. We will have 10 minutes of public comment in opposition and 10 minutes in support. Who would like to speak in opposition? There's no one online currently. Anyone in the room? All right, if you're in the room, please take a seat up front. All right, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nick Agopian, I represent the Teton County Board of County Commissioners. And today I think it's an odd spot to be. I think I'd like to find a place where I support it, but I don't support it today with the language that's currently there. And so I thought, we're here today in front of the Education Committee. You're getting an education on development around the state and all of the issues. One of the key points probably to bring up in terms of education is, I think it's only 10 counties have comprehensive zoning. And so then it leaves the door swung wide open. So to Representative Kelly's comment, I believe that we're really only talking about 10 counties in the state, and it's not a statewide issue that we're addressing because these counties don't, not every county has a permitting process in place that's very distinct and refined. But in thinking about the Education Committee and being here with you today, there is something that you have in common. This issue was taken up first by the Regulatory Reduction Task Force throughout this past interim and the previous interim. The bills addressing timelines were not moved forward by the Regulatory Reduction Task Force to the Appropriations Committee. Or maybe they were moved forward to Appropriations and Appropriations didn't take them up and sponsor them. But at the end of the day, we're talking about local control. And here's a committee that is very familiar with the distinction between the state's role and the local's role. And just as in education that this committee sees all of the time, our state has determined that it's most efficient to have locals control the school districts and how a school district operates within the state's framework. And I would suggest to you today, and I think the statutes reflect, that that's what was envisioned for local development controls in authorizing municipalities and counties to manage these issues today. And what's being brought forward today in this bill, in House Bill 184, undercuts that fundamental principle of local control, in my opinion. And it does so, I think, with a very blunt tool. This bill addresses only Title 16, which is the joint county and town and local control title. instead of addressing the specific municipal statutes, Title 15, and the specific county statutes in Title 18, that speak specifically to a variety of different components associated with development, spell out specifically the municipal and local controls in this state, and I believe set in motion that trend for local control on these issues. And so what I'd like to do is just identify one thing. And so in terms of that local control, taking that local input, bringing it in, we want to make sure that the local planning authority has the ability to review these things. Those things that a county commission typically, at the county level, typically reviews and votes, they could be handled administratively if they've delegated that authority to the administration. But when you do a change of permitted zoning use, or you do a variance, and I think when you go to page 2, as Representative Williams identified, and we're looking at lines 21 and 22, change of permitted zoning use, that may be written clumsy, and that may not be the intent, but this is something that would typically go in front of the Board of Commissioners of the Planning Commission to vote on a change. There's a process that's intended to ensure that the public's notified that a change of use is going to occur, whether it's a permitted use or not. But the way it's written, it's kind of clumsy. But regardless, it's my understanding that that is something that the commissioners themselves would vote on going forward. Same thing with a variance. In the variance, you're not asking to be treated like everybody else. And you're not saying I'm submitting a full application consistent with the International Building Code or what our community has adopted through its comprehensive plan, its LDRs, and through its planning commission. With a variance, you're asking to be treated separate and distinct from the rest of the population, what your neighbor's been held to. So we think it would be appropriate, to make, in the guise of finding a way forward to narrow the scope of this bill. I think you could easily do that by deleting that language. I believe I emailed the whole committee after permit. And then Representative Lawley brought up a great point about residential and narrowing this bill to residential, single family, residential townhome. But when we start talking about a multifamily, whatever that number is, 4, 6, 12, 20, 40 residential units, a 30-day building or a 60-day building review doesn't make a lot of sense. Permitting a large data center and everything that goes along with it, that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. So I think limiting it to some qualified residential use makes a lot of sense. And in terms of addressing our affordable housing, giving people certainty, that makes a lot of sense. When somebody shows up to my county planning commission and they know that they are seeking to permit something that has already been zoned, and they're doing it within the framework of the current building code, they should have an expectation of a timely review. And finding that path forward, that I'm at this table to find that path forward. But I think taking some actions here to narrow the scope of the bill would really help move it forward in that fashion, or kicking it, I think that's where I would start, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Andy Schwartz. I represent the town of Jackson. I have a different perspective on this. Prior to being a legislator, I spent 12 years as a county commissioner. So I have a pretty good sense of how the process works at the local level. I would say I agree with a lot that my colleague here said. I think this bill should be restricted to building permits, absolutely. But I think what the requirement, I believe that this is a local issue, and I would resist the notion that it requires statutory change. But if you feel that is necessary, I think what you should do is merely require that local governments have a timeline and make public on their website what the process is to get a building permit. Because we have 99 municipalities, 23 counties, their capacities to process these applications vary pretty widely. And the applications themselves can vary in complexity. So I think for building permits, I didn't like it in the Regulatory Reduction Task Force, but I'm at least comfortable with that. When you get to variances, it's a whole other concept. Variances are actually required to go through the public process. And I don't know about in your communities, but in my community, the public process can get very extensive. And having a timeline where you're essentially limiting public participation is problematic. I could go on, but in the interest of being brief, I will just say Town of Jackson is in opposition to this bill, and I stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Mayor Patrick Collins from the City of Cheyenne. Thanks for having me here today. The Regulatory Task Force has talked about this issue for a couple of years now. And every time an issue like this comes up, I keep asking for specific examples of where the problem is. And I keep hearing, well, we hear about it here or there, but, specific things where I could go research and look at and to talk to the people to find out what caused that. I just can't find those specific instances. I feel like we're a solution looking for a problem here. We had a similar situation here. Our local Chamber of Commerce did a poll on their satisfaction with our building department. And then it wasn't very pretty, the way it came out. And when I read the results, there wasn't anything actionable, things that I could physically fix. It was, are you happy? No. What are you happy about? Not happy about our UDC or our inspectors, but it wasn't anything specific. So I pulled 15 building permits out of the almost 4,000 building permits we did in 2023. And I made an appointment to visit with each of those people. And I asked them about timelines and inspectors and things. And I found that, quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of problems. Yeah, we missed a couple deadlines when we had some folks that were sick, or we had a couple big data centers come in and we got a little bit behind. But overall, the satisfaction was pretty high. When I look at the bill before us here, and a couple of things that comes to my mind, like when we talk about doing a zoning change or a change of zoning for something, we have to send that to our planning commission, which meets once a month. Then it's got to go through our city council, which takes 3 readings. I'm not sure I can do that in 60 days and meet our processes. I think a building permit, on the other hand, might be simpler. But then I think about the things that are being built in Cheyenne right now. A single-family home, our goal is to try to turn those in 10 days. I've heard a couple of them go as long as 30 days when we're really, really busy, but we get almost all of those out within 10 days, single-family homes and things like that. But we have builders building 300 and 400 unit apartment buildings. We have Meta here building an 800,000 square foot data center, hundreds of millions of dollars. We have 7 Microsoft campuses where they're building multiple data centers at a time. I'm not sure that we can do those in 60 days. And especially when I read the last paragraph on page 5 of this, where if we miss something, then we're going to get fined for that. So are we asking
out of time? If you would wrap up quickly,
Yeah, I would be
appreciate
happy
it.
to,
Thank
sir.
you.
From my perspective, are we trying to be accurate or are we trying to be fast? And when they say whose fault is it on page 5, lines 4 through 11, if the inspectors find something that was missed, who's responsible for that? Seems to me it's the engineer who brought the project to us who should have it right. And if we find something that's not right, then it was their responsibility to get it right. They're supposed to know the rules, the laws, that type of thing before it comes to us. All we're doing is trying to hold them and help them through that process.
All right, thank you.
So I would agree on the fact that if this was mostly
Thank
a
you.
residential.
We are out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is anybody speaking in support of the bill? We have a couple online. Would you like to bring them into the room with us as well? Thank you. Mr. Lindholm.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Tyler Lindholm. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in the state of Wyoming, and I'll be super fast. The Fast Track Permits Act is a significant step towards ensuring efficiency and transparency in land use permitting processes. By establishing clear deadlines for local government entities to review and respond to applications, the bill promotes accountability while reducing unnecessary delays for applicants that we do see primarily in 10 different counties. There is significant amount of legislation that has happened over the last 20 years that are consistently trying to kind of rein in that process. Everything from fences to different types of building projects and those types of things. It is a consistent problem within the Wyoming legislature, and it is consistently brought before you. So with this fast track permitting process, it is our belief that we can kind of rein in some of those issues that we've seen throughout the last decade and a half to 2 decades to hopefully get out in front of this. So putting a shot clock on some of these regulatory hurdles, we view as a good thing. We ask for your support in favor of this legislation.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right. Seeing as no one is lined up in the room, we'll go online.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Barrett is in the room, so whenever they're ready.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Barrett, let me give you a little of my background real quickly. I have a 30-year tenure as a building official in Utah, in Salt Lake County, and multiple certifications, so on and so forth, multiple state licensures, general engineering contractor, general building contractor. And one of the things I would like to start off with really quickly is that we faced this problem in Utah, and at first we went through the same struggle. We thought, okay, when does this happen? Is it really happening a whole lot? And Utah has the same kind of demographic as Wyoming. In essence, we have some, metropolitan areas. We also have some very rural jurisdictions, namely the one I live in, that's just 900 people currently. So we thought about, is this going to propose a burden on the jurisdiction? Is it going to usurp local control? We asked all these questions. And we eventually, at the state level, passed Utah Code 10-6-160 that essentially addresses this, and it's a little bit more elaborate than what you're seeing before you today, but essentially it assigns review timeframes and processing timeframes for permits, and it is hyper focused on residential 1 and 2 family dwellings and some light R3 or multiple family dwellings. And we have those timeframes down to 21 days, 14, 3 days for an inspection request. And it just, in essence, what it does is it puts some accountability on the jurisdiction and a baseline, gives a baseline for each jurisdiction that's uniform throughout the state. And it puts some accountability on the jurisdiction versus now all the accountability is on the client or the contractor. And we get that the engineers are responsible to submit code compliant plans and specifications, and then architects are responsible to do that, and that the contractor is responsible to comply with the code and deliver a code compliant product. But that said, if a contractor doesn't perform a correction, then he gets charged a reinspection fee. Well, what happens to the jurisdiction when they kick the can down the road and cost, an applicant, 6 months to do something in a review that should have taken 2 weeks? Now, I understand that this is not living in the world of public comment, have to have public hearings and all of those things. This is very simply a project that already complies with the zoning, that already is ready to go, simply getting a permit submitting a permit application for a building. So that said, where there's no uniformity and there's no baseline set out across the state, I would highly recommend that there be something done in the form of this bill to achieve that. Because as of today, it's not equitable there. And I know, and I apologize, the representative that spoke that said, give me a case in point. Give me a case in point where this has happened, not just, hey, we know if it happens. I think Meredith is a gentleman online as well that could speak to that. And his case in point, it went on, I think he lives in near Driggs. Anyway, he he went through this very thing, and to get a barn built, it took him almost a year to get the permit. And that's just simply unacceptable. When you've got developers that have a lot of money out and they're financing to be able to put this project together and get it on the ground, some of these guys are paying interest payments, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month. And if you're kicking this out they've got to pay those payments when something could be processed in 2 weeks. Now at the state level, we did 21 days, 14 days to turn around a single family dwelling plan review. And then again, like I said, 3 days when you request an inspection, they can have 3 days to show up and perform the inspection. And I don't think we have not experienced any kickback by the jurisdictions or pushback from the jurisdictions that this is unreasonable. My jurisdiction, where I was a regulator, I would do 25 inspections a day sometimes, and we have a huge area, and it's everything from Kennecott mine to a single family dwelling or a tough shed. And so we were able to do that and meet those requirements. And we also were able to meet the requirement of plan reviews, and we had everything from, like I said, from highly technical industrial areas to, down to single family dwellings. And of course that 2-week plan review turnaround wouldn't apply to something that was needing a zone change or was, highly complicated, like a, industrial development, those kinds of things. So this, again, we focused on residential construction, residential permitting, and it's worked very well. We've now used this for, well, it was last amended in November, I think, of 2024. But anyway, it's been very successful. So I support what the intent of this bill is. There need to be some, I think 60 days is way too liberal. I don't know why 60 days, would be something that maybe they were trying to be very generous and liberal, but I think 60 days is way too long. And he, spoke about returning it down to, or reining it back into 30 days. That's still very generous. Like I said, we're at a 21 and 14 and 3. So at any rate, I think Meredith should speak to his particular situation. He can speak to this really happened to me. I can't speak to that. So anyway, again, I definitely would recommend approving this bill, maybe perhaps with some amendments to the timeframes and clarification on the focus of residential application. Thank you. Are there any questions for me?
Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you. It doesn't look like we have anybody else looking to comment on this one, so we'll close public testimony. Committee, what is your pleasure on the bill?
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Singh, seconded by
I'll second it.
Representative Strock. Are there any amendments? Vice Chair Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to do it in 2 separate amendments, so I don't have to divide it. Something we don't even want to be divided, but on page 2, line 21, I would propose deleting the comma after the word permit and then deleting the balance of that sentence except for the period. And that would be my first amendment. It takes out the change of permitted zoning use or variance. We had some testimony on the issue of that's a little more complex.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Kelly. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing that.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Singh.
can we just get Representative Filer's input on how this would affect the bill?
Oh, yes. Representative Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Lawley and Representative Singh. Were you talking about page 2, line 21?
Correct.
After permitted? So I don't think we,
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Williams.
correct me if I'm wrong, after permit and not after
Permit.
permitted, correct?
right.
Yeah, permit.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, be after permit, then delete the language that says change of permitted zoning use or variance. Mr. Chairman, I got some reservations about that. I could feel okay with if it was more of building permit, comma, change the use of permitted zoning use, period, and strike or variance. And maybe just get the variance language out of there, Mr. Chairman.
All right, are there any further questions, discussions, or changes based on that? Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think we had testimony that when you get into the area of change of permitted zoning use or variance, you enter a different sort of area of regulation in which there's usually some public comment, some other things. So maybe not in every situation, but that's where I think it gets a little cloudy, and we are putting timelines on other places and some penalties. And anyway, that's my reasoning for it, is that we had the testimony that, and if you have never dealt in any of this, you would understand why that could be a little more complex.
Representative Filer.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, but I do believe permitted use, under the statute, I believe it's, if it's proposed, classified as a permit. My watch was talking to me. Classified as permanent use under the current zoning district, and a hearing is typically not required for this. So this is something that can be actually used as an administrative deal, not where they would have to do a public comment. So that's why I think change of permitted zoning use, that's the key word, use. It's permitted in that use. So I think that part should stay, and then just delete variance, because if you are making a variance, even though I don't feel very well about the variance part, because if it could be a 1 foot offset that you need for a garage or something, I think it's a little bit overreach to do a public comment on variance. But that's why, but I mean, I'm willing to work with the committee whichever way we go on that, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? All right, we are voting on the amendment. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
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 I think it failed. All right, the amendment has failed. Any further amendments? Representative Ugamas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the bill, I think this is fitted more conducively for residential. And I would kind of like to move it in that direction, because there is a huge difference between a residential and a commercial or an industrial planning phase. So I think if we try to lump it all together, it gets kind of murky and problematic, especially if we begin to enforce a timeline on a commercial or industrial job to that 60 days. You're going to run into some serious problems with the planning phase, rushing and making mistakes due to that rushing. So I think this is a lot more tailored for the residential aspect.
All right, okay.
I don't know how I don't know how I would amend that, because I've never really done that aspect of it.
On page 2.
Okay, I think we can deal with that. The amendment has a second. Representative Filer, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I totally understand those comments, but I also want to point you to the, page 3. A lot of those industrial uses are going to be conditional uses. There's going to be something that fits in there, but it's not something that's applicable for the area. So you're going to go through the public comment, you're going to go through the scrutiny. So this bill does not apply to them. So it's pretty much kind of diverted towards the residential already, the way it's written, but it also helps out with the ag side of it too, to where if you want to build a certain barn on for your agricultural property and the property rights of that. But a lot of your conditional use permits, or rezoning or subdivision permits, all those types of bigger industrial stuff, I would say probably 99% are going to have a conditional use, and they're going to go through the public scrutiny, and they wouldn't be under the purview of this, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Follow up. Representative Gugemas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as far as the timeline, would that adjust longer than 60 days if it went through that additional comment and all that stuff as well?
Representative Filer.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, because then you have there's a certain laws and ordinances that have a certain amount of public comment and all these. And we also got to remember, whenever you have an industrial type build, usually it's years in planning on something like that. So you're going to have a lot more of the public scrutiny and the abuse, but you're going to have a lot more stages in that one because of the conditional uses of that property. And like I said, under this shall not, be purview into this. That's why we writ those conditional use and stuff like that inside this bill to protect that from not getting a permit for a nuclear power plant in 30 days. I agree, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All right, I would add that I think this bill is probably most useful on the commercial side, having been involved in building my own construction projects in a few different states. I've worked in states that have had this sort of language and states that haven't, and it does seem to speed up the process quite a bit. But I think the commercial projects do get bogged down in the bureaucracy much more often than residential projects. So, all right, further discussion. We are voting on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No.
Amendment fails. All right, further discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to make an amendment on page 4, line 11. That paragraph, II, it has to do with requests that require approval by state or federal agencies. I do not trust, especially federal agencies, to move their feet very quickly, particularly with a 10-foot or a 10-day deadline. And so my amendment would be to strike that paragraph.
Second. No second.
The whole thing from line 11 to line 16.
Okay, we need a second, or the amendment fails for lack of second. I think it does, so it fails for lack of second. All right, any further discussion on the bill? All right, we are voting on House Bill 202. Can you please call the roll?
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 202, Fast Track Permits Act, do pass. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson?
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
No.
Representative Lawley?
No.
Representative Singh?
Aye.
Representative Strock?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
No.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
6 aye, 3 no.
All right, thank you. The bill passes the committee. I think that 10 minutes is probably not going to be enough time to deal with as large of a topic as the next bill is. And so I think we will have to forward that to the beginning of our next meeting. So I apologize to anyone who may have traveled here. But there will be testimony available online, and we'll try to be able to take significant testimony on this on Wednesday. So thank you. Meeting adjourned.